All right, everyone. Since the beginning of Israel's incursion into Gaza, it was always going to be the case that Israel was eventually going to lose the optics war because Hamas incursion was effectively a singularity, and then Israel moved in and it looked like they were going to draw up and do a land invasion. They bombed a bunch of things to shit, and so slowly over time what initially was a justified retaliation, attempting to get hostages back, retaliating against Hamas positions and stuff, that would have been accepted generally by the international community, was immediately or near immediately condemned within only a few short weeks by much of the world. And even now, like, the U.S. leadership is like, well, please show restraint, we ask for a ceasefire, don't you get into Rafah. And now they've gone into Rafah. By the way, another embarrassment yesterday, we'll talk about this later on the live stream actually, the Biden admin the other day backing off, doing the red line thing that Obama used to do, and after having said it would be really bad and we'd be really uncomfortable with the Israelis going into Rafah, they go into Rafah. But it was only a limited incursion, so it doesn't count. The fact that the Camp David Accords are being openly violated right now has slipped everyone's mind. Most of them don't even remember that those exist, and Egypt shows no proclivity to complain. I wonder why. But now, there's another optics war brewing, and it's one that's mostly in the U.S. and parts of Europe, and it's beginning to lose favor for Palestine, actually, by default. And that's the campus protests and some of the riots you're seeing. You saw in Germany the other day. You've seen them in the Netherlands, I think France as well. I think probably in Britain, although I haven't checked the news there. To check the BBC. I wonder what that stands for on 4chan. But the campus protests have sort of counterbalanced what Israel's doing, because people in the United States appear in many cases more focused on the campus protests and the disruption to students and faculty and in some cases private business and stuff, as opposed to the war itself. Israel now has a bit of a smokescreen, a little bit more latitude and leeway. The people that are most vocal in supporting Palestine are actually making it harder for anyone in the diplomatic community to really help the Palestinians. I would point out, and again, I'm not Team Israel or Team Palestine, but I would point out that a lot of the campus protesters, they tend to be on the left wing of politics. You do see Antifa there, you do see pride flags there and stuff like that, would arguably be killed if they were physically in Palestine. This point is salient. This point does actually make sense. It can be used or construed rather as a propagandistic talking point, but it's not wrong. Israel, by bombing things, the 2-to-1 civilian death toll, leveling entire towns, was losing the optics war handily. But now people are fixated on something else that is very optically poor. When you get a group of pro-Palestinian / pro-Hamas / simply anti-Semitic protesters and or rioters, and there is a wide variety of these different groups and ideologies, and some people are literally just there for the clout, or to be political, and they don't even really care about Palestine, or in some cases, people that don't give a shit about Israel, and they're protesting in favor of Israel. When you get that, it rankles people, number one, politicizes it, number two, and when you get some of these groups attempting to tear down the American flag, literally saying death to America, I think on one campus the other day, there were some of these individuals that were calling for beheading members of their faculty. That doesn't look good to the average American. It doesn't look good to the average individual in the Western world. So any sympathy that was generated saying, well, Israel is going pretty far with this, and you've got 25,000 dead civilians, and basically the whole population internally displaced. That becomes a side issue. It becomes a side issue when it comes stateside, and that's what's in the news. Despite the MSNBCs of the world saying, well, these are fiery but mostly peaceful protests, most people don't watch MSNBC. The coverage they're seeing in some cases gets violent, and that's stateside. That's here, in this country. Therefore, it is very optically poor. It forms arguably more than just a counterbalance. Arguably, it steals the show entirely. And that's why you know that some of these people, not the peaceful protesters that are saying solidarity, free Palestine, end the war, we want a ceasefire. That's free speech. It's free expression. People are amenable to that message, and that is the bulk of those people. Here's the problem. The squeaky wheel gets the oil now, doesn't it? So if the shoe on the other foot, IDF goes into an area in Gaza, and they find that a bunch of Palestinians have been enslaved by Hamas, and they liberate them. They actually save a bunch of Palestinians. That's not going to make the news. Okay, maybe page B. No, the news of the day is 20 orphans that just got flattened in a schoolroom. On the other hand, with the Palestine protesters, it doesn't matter if you have a bunch of peaceful protesters that are making salient points. What matters is this other group of people that just firebombed a police car. That's what the media is going to focus on generally, because that's what the public is going to be most intrigued by. It's a little bit clickbaity at times. This happens all the time. Why do you think you don't see much happy news in the news? Why is it all a bunch of doom pill stuff? Because that's what gets more attention. And being doom pilled pays. I would note that there are some content creators that operate in the same capacity as the legacy media on that token. My channel happens not to be one of them, you may have noticed. But the protesters here are losing the optics war stateside, and while the Israelis are losing it largely internationally still, in nations where the fixation is going to be on these protests or riots or whatever they happen to be, it's going to be mainly negative coverage. It's going to be mainly fixated on the burning police car or the broken windows of the admin building, not on the people that are outside holding signs saying love and peace. I would notice also, you see a great lack right now of the traditional anti-war left. The traditional anti-war left, and listen, it involves Jews and Muslims, I suppose, is like love beads and meditation and shit like that. Hey, can we get along? And they invite Yoko Ono to make a speech or something like that. That's not really what you're seeing here. What you're seeing here is a conglomerate of people that are well-meaning but optically poor, people who are malevolent and making money and getting their name out there, trust funders and outright communists and people like that, all melted into a slurry, alongside genuine student protesters who get effectively trapped up in the mix, and they might get punished simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time because some other group decided to infiltrate and use it as an opportunity to beat on the police with baseball bats. Well, that's optically poor. The average American, soccer mom America doesn't like that sort of thing. And a lot of Americans have kids in college and they're like, don't you dare go to the protest, stay away from that. Why don't you come home for the weekend? Things might get a little bit dicey and I don't really want you ending up in prison. Well, you've managed to do as poor a job as Netanyahu on the optics end. You're screwing yourself. Well, really, you're not screwing yourself. You're screwing the Palestinians, actually. If you want any hope of a ceasefire, you need people to be focused on what's actually going on in the conflict itself. Instead, a large number of people are fixated on the stateside issue of the campus protests and the offshoot protests elsewhere. They're not all on college campuses, you'll see. They're fixated on that. Optically, you're losing, just the same as Israel is. So, yeah, real helpful. If you're like gung-ho for Palestinian liberation, you're really helping your brothers over there in Palestine. Doing such a great job. That's about all. Peace out.